My problem is American citizens who legitimately think it's okay for Russia to invade Ukraine and think that it's no problem and that Russia's the good guy in this whole thing. You're mad. I don't hate Vladimir Putin. I understand why he had to do what he did. He had to do this because his country is based around petroleum, and Ukraine had their own petroleum in the. It's so funny when people are like, "Yeah, they built the Nord Stream pipeline. They didn't need to go through Ukraine." How do you explain that? I'm like, so was it? So they invaded what to free the people of Donbass? Do you really believe that?
Yeah,
like,
they were Nazis in the.
Does anyone really believe that? Like, are you that dumb that you believe Vladimir Putin literally is doing this out of the kindness of his heart to free the people of Donbass? That he's building a land bridge to Crimea to free the people of Donbass? The people of Donbass who could have easily just walked into Russia. Do you know who would have allowed them to walk in? The Russians. They speak Russian. Like this idea, it's just so. It's almost like saying that there's police brutality in San Antonio, therefore Mexico gets to invade to try to liberate San Antonio. Like, what are you talking about, dude? It's so stupid. And so this concept, this thing happens. Like this idea that people are. I was like, well, obviously the United States instigated this by encouraging Ukraine to support to try to join NATO, and therefore Russia had to invade somehow. Again, if somebody breaks into my house, it's their fault. They broke into my house. I don't care what justification you use. As soon as Russia it goes into another country's sovereignty, a country that the EU recognized, that the European Union recognized, that was considering joining NATO, and that the United Nations recognizes, and that Russia even recognizes their borders. When a sovereign country gets invaded like that, then this idea that all of a sudden, well, it's totally fine they did that because we're anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia, and because Vladimir Putin is strong. Vladimir Putin, strong, masculine man. No, he's made some horrible mistakes. He should not have. This invasion was supposed to take 10 days. It's taken a year and a half. It turned into a huge debacle. They've lost over 350 of their own fixed-wing aircraft, most of which through friendly fire. Their pilots are incredibly undertrained, and this is my favorite one. Oh my God, that fucking hypersonic missile that the Russians were supposed to have. So basically, for those of you who don't know, ICBMs are like artillery shells. They go up into space and they come back down. The weakness of an ICBM is that you can't launch the multi-reentry vehicles, the MIRVs, until you come back through the atmosphere. So during that point, the reentry, the nose cone is super hot, and it gives off a huge IR signature, which makes it a glowing red target for the United States to shoot it down. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's a huge weakness for the ICBM idea, is because they can't change their direction in flight. They're just ballistic. Ballistic means they don't change afterwards.
Yeah, it's on a set path.
Correct.
Based on math and science.
Correct. Hypersonic missiles, however. It's so funny, like ICBMs, how do they work if there's no gravity? Flat Earthers, how does ICBMs work if there's no gravity? I'm just curious. The other one is, so the idea of a hypersonic missile is it's a missile that travels above Mach 5, so more than 3,400 miles an hour, and it can change direction, and it doesn't go out into an orbit. It doesn't come back, go to space, and then re-enter, so it has that huge IR signature upon re-entry. And so because it can change direction, you can't predict where it's going, so it's much harder to shoot it down. And so Russia said it has this technology, and Russia does not have this technology. The United States gave Patriot missile batteries to the Ukrainians, and those Patriot missile batteries shot down eight of those hypersonic missiles. Right after the first one was shot down, the Russians arrested 3 of their scientists for treason.
He said, what do you mean this doesn't work?
What do you mean this doesn't work? You mean I lied to all these people? Like, that's the problem. I don't have a problem with Russia lying. Russia is supposed to lie. Russia has just like the United States has no necessity. There's no requirement for the United States to protect Russia. There's no requirement for Russia to tell the truth to the United States. I don't have a problem with us playing these war games. My problem is American citizens who legitimately think it's okay for Russia to invade Ukraine and think that it's no problem and that Russia's the good guy in this whole thing. You're mad. What you're saying has no basis in reality. And what's even worse is Russia is going to lose, because one of the things that's happened is one of my favorite statistics that blows people's minds. But people are going to say I'm wrong, but go ahead and disagree with this. The United States GDP is what, George? Austin, the GDP of the United States is what? Anybody?
Sorry, my math is off.
Huh?
Yeah, it's in the trillions, right?
It's $23 trillion. It's about a quarter of the world's GDP is the American GDP. You with me? Okay.
Right.
Russia, 5,900 nuclear weapons. What's their GDP? Just curious.
Well, you said this last time. You said their economy is smaller than like Italy's, right?
Their economy, their GDP is less than Italy's. They have 1 aircraft carrier. Italy has 2. Italy's GDP is
How many
two,
do we
2
have?
billion. We have 11.
I'm sorry. It's just the
Russia-
astronomical difference here.
Russia has a GDP about the size of Mexico's. Hey, George, do you remember when we had the discussion about the Mexican tanks and the Mexican ICBMs? Do you remember all about the Mexican aircraft carriers, the Mexican submarines? Do you remember that? Do you know? Hey, what about the Mexican ICBMs? Do you remember that? Were we talking
Or the
about that
Mexican
before?
space program.
I don't think they exist.
So if we talk about Mexican ICBMs or Mexican fighter jets or Mexican stealth technology, you would laugh at me. What do you mean? Mexico is a poor country. Mexico doesn't have stealth aircraft. That's stupid. But for some reason, we believe that Russia is going to develop this Sukhoi 57 to be stealth.
But now, is it this because this is hindering from the Cold
propaganda.
War? Yeah, from the Cold War.
Nothing but propaganda. Russia has some advancements because they've been making armaments for 70 years. They actually are good at making rifles. They're good. They're better
The
at
AK is one of the best
sure.
rifles out there. Yeah.
They're better at making fighter jets than any other country in the world besides the United States. They're really good at making armaments. They just don't have any money to prosecute a war. China has way more money. China's GDP is 17 trillion. China has way more people and they have way more money to prosecute a war, but they just copy their armaments. They're cheap. Their armaments are cheap knockoffs of Russian.